All right, Trails Collective audience, we are here with the TC Live interviews for this week. So I was cued into the Sasquad crew and Kim live with their interviews on Wednesday evenings. I think they go every other. So I'm going to try to mix it up and get off of the Sasquad week. And we'll maybe try to find another night to be consistent, maybe like Tuesdays or Thursdays. This week we are live with Nicole Yokum. Nicole, I think I first met you maybe like Water Gap. I think you ran the 25K there and connected a bit, at least post race, and then for sure at Frozen Snot. And so just lead in with, so what was the deal with you beat me to that first climb at like Frozen Snot? I mean,
do you mean beating you to the beginning of the first climb?
You did. You beat me to the beginning of the first climb. Let's clarify that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
How far in? How far in is that first climb? I don't remember these things very well with these races.
Well, you've done a lot of them, right? And the amount of, well, I guess we'll get into that. The trail races that you have done probably tend to meld together because you go after pretty aggressive technical ones, as you have referenced, some mid-distance races. But Frozen Snot leads in with, I think it's like a mile and a half, mostly road with a gradual climb up to that first boulder section. And I didn't look into, I guess I kind of have fun when I go into races, not looking into course profiles. And so it's all just kind of a surprise to me where things are. And so we got to that first section and there you were, and you popped up in that video, but clearly you were getting after it, and it clearly speaks to the courses you're choosing, but also your speed. Because I mean, I'm not as fast as I used to be, but I'm not slow. So kind of there you were.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool, by the way, that you have a similar approach to me, because I don't think too many people, as far as I know anyway, don't worry about the course profile heading into it. But I have the same kind of tactic. And usually I think it does kind of work that way, where you have a mile or so of flat with a lot of these races, or relatively flat, and then you head up into the mountain. So yeah, I mean, one of the things I really love about the shorter distance technical trail races, when I say shorter distance, I mean half marathon, 25K, that's what I've been really focusing on, is that you can go out pretty hard and you can really keep your speed. And then it's a matter of course, climbing and then descending. But on the portions that are flatter, you can try to pound it out a little bit. And I've also learned, of course, that it's important to try to establish a position in the first part of the race. So you really don't want to get stuck trying to get around people for the first climb, for example. That's just extra energy and time to try to do that. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll dig into various aspects of that. So to your point there, in terms of getting out right, I mean, and I guess I'm lucky in the sense that I'm often, or have been at least historically, off the front. So, but some of the courses that you have run, for instance, Heiner, the 50K I've only run once. And again, didn't really look into what the course was all about. I think I was aware that it was hilly or whatever. But I guess that's really important, because you cross that bridge, you tuck into the dead end road, and then suddenly you're on the single track where there's not really any room to pass. And so that I would imagine a lot of these races, become a quick conga line. And for those who aren't off the front, I mean, that's definitely a consideration.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I'm honest and I think about it, I don't know that I've had too many situations actually in races where I went out too slow and then early on was having to pass people on the hills. I mean, I hear about that happening, but I think actually the issue that I had for a while when I was still kind of adjusting to the sport and building my strength, certainly with the climbs, is that I'd go out hard and I wouldn't really be able to maintain it on the uphills. And at some point I'd sink back. I think I'm a lot faster on the downhills, even now when I've worked a lot on my climbing. So yeah, I have run into that issue in terms of going around people in the woods and on a single track, and it can be pretty sketchy. So it's certainly something to be avoided if you can. But yeah, I mean, the way that I generally approach is that I try to go out hard and I try to establish a position, and that also kind of encourages you. Certainly, like at Heiner, where it starts out on the road and you go across the bridge, and then you're on this really narrow single track, and then you have a pretty good climb for a while. I try to make sure that I'm in a good enough position so that once you start climbing, you're going to be encouraged by the faster people around you, or the pretty fast people around you, to not slow down, to keep pushing on the climbs. Because, it's easy to think like, oh, this race is going to have 4,000 feet of elevation gain, or if you know that, or something like that. So I better start out easy. And I mean, the fact is it's going to be hard to climb the hill no matter what. So it's better, I think, to just push it from the beginning. And I think the way that I learned to be good at it too is getting used to maintaining that speed. So becoming strong enough to keep going fast from the beginning.
And you are fat. I mean, and any number of things, and we can come back or tangent back to these, but I guess that also speaks to your strength and ability or capacities as a runner as well. And you can maybe cue us in a little bit to your background, but at least more recently, yeah, I mean, you're pretty quick, right? I mean, you're typically in the top 3, usually 2 or 1, at least in the women's field. And then in some of these races, I think I just glanced over your ultra sign up queue. You were like 3rd overall or something like that at Call of the Wild, just outright in the field. And so, I mean, you're quick. I mean, I don't know. And glancing back at your results, as far back as I can see, you were usually up front too. So running always been a part of your life? Is it something that you came into later, or kind of what's been your what's your history?
Yeah, well, it's a long story, so feel free to interrupt me if I go on too long.
We got at least an hour here.
Okay, an hour. Excellent. Yeah, I've been a runner for a long time. So I was very athletic as a kid, and I started out doing a number of different sports. Like I would roller skate, and I was really into basketball for a while. So I would do my drills every day, my basketball drills. There was a period of time when I was like 10, I was doing basketball drills for like an hour and a half a day. So I was very driven with sports since the time I was a kid. And even then, actually, so my mom and my sister were runners, and they took me in elementary school, I think, to a 10K in Manhattan a few times. This is something I have a picture of because it's hilarious. My parents sent this to me maybe a month ago, and I just thought it was really cute and really funny. So I have a picture of myself from when I think I was 11. Completing this.
Well, basketball, hopefully you're about to be rocking board shorts, and we're going to know where certain Salmon athletes got it from. Saw a picture of you rocking the basketball shorts, and like, that looks
close. It's the basketball shorts. Oh, now this isn't working the same way, of course, as when we tested it. I don't know why. Well, I'll try to figure this out. Maybe a little bit later. We have another photo moment. Yep. But in any case, yeah, so I did this 10K as a kid, and I would wear these really huge basketball shorts, kind of like the Courtney Dauwalter thing, actually.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. There it is.
Right. I thought you were talking about like surfing shorts.
She probably finished right behind you in that race, Courtney did. And she was like, that's how the fast girls do it. That's what I'm going to do.
Well, I wasn't fast at 10K at that age. I think it took me like a little over an hour. But basically, I joined track in 7th grade, and I could do like a 5:45 mile. And that was pretty.
Whoa, come on.
That was pretty good, right?
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was pretty good for a 7th grader, and that's really when something changed.
That's pretty good for a 17th grader, actually.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So at that point, that summer, I really started running every day. So I would run like 3 miles a day. I think what I'd do is I'd run to the high school track and then do a mile and then run home, kind of thing. And that was a very painful summer, actually, because I had pain in my knees like every day. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't really that pleasant, except that I was getting into running. And so I enjoyed it, on that level. And then in 8th grade, I ran on the high school team, and I was kind of slowly giving up my basketball dreams. It was very hard for me to do that. I was like, I'm a basketball player. And there was even a phase where I would go to track practice, even though like I wasn't on the winter track team. Mm-hmm. And then I go to basketball practice after because it started at 5 or something like that. And it was pretty ridiculous. But by 10th grade, I started really committing to it. And basically 10th through 12th grade, I was like running 3 seasons of track and cross country and winning a lot of county championships. And I would run in the state meet. I never really was like top 3 in the states or anything. But I was really serious about it. It's pretty much that, in school was pretty much my life. And so I went into college thinking that I was going to be running competitively. And I just discovered that it really wasn't for me in college. Like, I needed a break mentally. I wanted to try other things. And unfortunately, it was a situation where the coach wasn't really into me. I wanted to do theater. That was what I decided to do in college. And it doesn't really go well with competitive varsity athletics, in my experience anyway. So I kept running, but I stopped competing for a while. And I think I also just, like I said, mentally wanted a break from competition. So the next phase of it was after college, I was living in Vermont and I saw an ad in the newspaper, I think, for the Vermont 50. And I just remember thinking, well, that's different, and that sounds like something cool and something really difficult. So I signed up for the Vermont 50K, not right away. It was maybe the year after I first saw it in the newspaper. And I trained on some level, like I ran a lot and I would train for the distance. So what I used to do, it's kind of hilarious, is I would run laps around Lake Morey in Fairleigh, Vermont, which is really flat, but I would do it's 5 miles around. So I do 3-4 laps. And I do some hilly runs in Vermont, but I really wasn't training on trails. I really wasn't training for the elevation. And I just didn't have any idea what I was getting into. So I did that first 50K in road shoes. And a friend of mine, not long before the race, was like, that this is a trail race, right? And I just didn't have any comprehension. I was like, it's going to be fine. I've been training, not knowing what I was getting into. And it wasn't really an automatic click at that point. I mean, I did really well in that first 50K. I came in second for women, and I ran 5 hours flat, I think, which for that course was a decent time. Yeah. It was really difficult. My legs really, really hurt. I think the other thing is I'm really fast on the downhill. So I would fly in the downhills, and then I think about halfway through, I was just in pain because I had wasted my muscles. Yeah. Anyway, so there was a phase after that where I was kind of experimenting with the 50K. I think there were a couple of years where I would do a 50K a year. So I did the Vermont 50K again. I did the Vermont 50 one year, but that was the year I had pneumonia for a month or two before the race. So that was a little strange. And I kind of experimented with the 50Ks, but it's interesting. I still was really not into going out and training on the trails. So I had a couple of trails that I felt comfortable with. It's a 3-mile loop in Vermont, in the town that I lived. And I would just do repeats of that. And it doesn't have a whole lot of elevation, I realize now. But it felt like, okay, it's a trail race. I'm training on a trail. And I also at some point kind of figured out that if I did a 50K every month, that was almost like training for the next one.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my way of coping with not really being comfortable, really getting out there in the woods. I think I was afraid of getting lost. I didn't have the right gear. All these things, which were actually pretty rational concerns, given my background growing up in the suburbs, and so forth. So, that was part of my running experience too, but it really wasn't until moving to State College, Pennsylvania, and starting to experiment there with the shorter distances that I really fell in love with the technical, what I consider shorter distance trail races. And that also wasn't immediate. I mean, the first time I did, and the only time actually that I did the Roth Rock Challenge, which was 2018, and the Greenwood Furnace race, it's one of my favorite races in PA. I just remember thinking, this is nuts. Why do these people think that you can run on rocks? This is so dangerous. What are they doing? What is this? And something just shifted where I realized that if I got out there and I actually trained on those courses after years of being stubborn about this, if you actually just go and train for the elevation, train on the rocks, you can teach your body to do it. And I at least that's been my experience, that I've really taught myself. I've developed the skills to be agile on the rocks and to be able to run up the hills and run really fast down the steep rocky hills. And it's really cool. It's a really cool thing to have not mastered, but the journey of not even thinking it was possible to feeling like it's something I do well is pretty amazing.
And that is a journey, right? And there's so many things, I guess, along that trajectory then. So even backing it up when you were younger, saying when you were 7th grade or whatever that was, all banged up, probably ice bags on the knees, just kind of half broken. I mean, even just for the amount of young ladies that are able to kind of get through that window. I mean, I think I remember reading a stat somewhere where there's more injuries in junior high or modified girls cross country than any sport of any gender, of any age. So more injuries in girls modified cross country than there are in NFL football or, whatever it might be. And so just as the body is really developing along that time, I mean, that's a lot to kind of absorb and make it through and kind of keep going and enjoying running for running's sake. And then for you to continue to, I think, develop then as an athlete, I would assume that I also think it's pretty great to see the amount of kids that start with like ball sports, whether it be soccer, whether it's basketball or whatever. And I don't know what the chicken and egg equation is there, but it seems like a lot of them emerge with really excellent coordination. And so for the trajectory for you, which you went on to find kind of mountain and technical trail races, that's really part of that package where you're just kind of wired for coordination at that point. And then if we unpack and jump in, obviously, at any point here, but then bouncing even, I guess, further into your trajectory, you mentioned you grew up in the suburbs and not necessarily feeling comfortable getting lost out on trails. Like the amount of people that don't really have exposure to trails at all to be able to find that safety, security, confidence to get out and start exploring some of those. I imagine a lot of people aren't lucky enough or aren't lucky enough to, I guess, have the experience and confidence to move off. And then for you to be in State College, to find the technicality of terrain, it's one thing to be able to have that all around you as a phenomenal trail town. I think, phenomenal trail town, access to a lot of technical trails, a lot of steep. It's a little bit tougher, obviously, when you don't have that out your back door. And then the last point in your trajectory, and then jump back into any if you want. Crap, I think I'm just losing the last but something you had also just said on, you're speaking to just using for the training effect, the number of events that you were jumping into as training, which I think is great. If people can do it, is just sign up for these events. You don't have to worry about getting in a certain long run because you're already doing the race. And that also plays out in your ultra sign up record, is that you're doing quite a number of races kind of back to back or every few weeks, or at least until COVID you were.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe I'll go backwards. So this was years ago that I was doing, 50K a month. I mean, like the only issue was that I was trying to race them, but also really using them as training for the next one, since I wasn't training properly otherwise, in terms of the elevation. But yeah, certainly the last year, or before the pandemic started, so the last racing year that I had, I was racing almost every weekend. I mean, certainly every other weekend. And that's another thing I have to say that I love about the shorter distances, is that you can really do that. I think if you're smart, you can really go out there and race really well, very often. And maybe it's possible to do that with something like a 50 miler too, but I imagine that it's not. That they'd have to be more.
Not the way that you're racing. I mean, you're out there,
right?
You're laying it out there. It's not like you're doing it to finish or whatever.
Right. And actually, this kind of ties back into your first point now that I think about it, because you're talking about pain and, the pain that you have to deal with, that some of us have to deal with in order to adjust to the sport, but there's also the pain of injury. So I had that issue with my knees when I was, in 7th grade. So it was like I was 12, 13. And somebody told me, I think my sister said that the track coach said that it was because she's older than me, so she was running track. She said that it was something like my calf muscles were really well developed from all the basketball I played, but my quads weren't. So there was an imbalance. So who knows? That's the only explanation I ever got for that. But yeah, that was definitely just pushing through pain and having faith that it was actually okay to be doing that. On the other hand,
was that because he couldn't see your quadricep muscles because you were wearing the basketball shorts to run in? And it's just,
I'm so glad that you've uncovered the illusion at the.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been it. Yeah. Yep.
I hope I can show that picture. So, but then in 9th grade, actually, part of what happened is that I had a hip injury, and I'm not exactly sure what that was from, but it seemed to be kind of more of a growing pain kind of issue. And, what's interesting about this is that I think one of the things that's really important to be really good about as a competitive runner is, when is the pain an injury? When do you have to lay off? When is it like, that's not the whole like no pain, no gain to some extent, but yeah, sometimes it means you have to stop because you're injured and your body needs to rest and you need to heal before you really do anything. And then there's other kinds of pain that are very normal, of course, for the training and for racing. And I think getting a hold on that it took me a lot of time to be comfortable saying to myself, no, you need to take a day off because you're injured, or you need to take a week off because you're injured. But that's one of the things I've gotten a lot better about. And that's, I think, been part of my success, where it's like, yeah, I actually am very lucky that I haven't gotten many injuries in the last few years at all. But I think part of the reason is that if something comes up, I will rest. I'll take 2 days off, take a third day off. Again, this hardly ever happens, luckily. but it's what I do, and it seems to work because it means that a small thing doesn't have the chance to turn into a big problem.
Sure.
Although now that I say that, I remember that in the 2019 racing season, I had a couple of injuries in the beginning, like in May, that stuck with me until June. I mean, that's like, it makes the point because I had races lined up and I didn't want to not do them. So I knew it wasn't really the right thing, but I did the races anyway. And it really wasn't until June, I think, that I had the chance to give my body the time it needed to heal, which I did. But anyhow.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty critical thing to know about yourself and in general. My college coach was a pretty good runner in college, but he had some injuries, and I don't know whether he broke his back from trauma or something stress related. Mm-hmm. But in order to, I think, finish, I think as the story went, his team, he ran for Midwest School North Central, which is just like a powerhouse, and anticipated to win cross country nationals every year or whatever. And with his injury, I think it was maybe like I don't know whether it was junior or senior year, but he was one of those individuals that I think never really learned to, I think, acknowledge injury and treat it as such. And I think to run in postseason that year, and I think he ended up still potentially an All-American. They still potentially won nationals, but in order to get him to be able to run, to like get out of bed, let alone run, he was having to, I think, inject himself with horse tranquilizers, just to relax like that area. And that mindset, right, doesn't go away. So in college, he was somebody, and something you just said made me think of it, because as athletes, we knew that he didn't deal with injury too well, because based on his track record, like you're talking to a guy who injected himself with tranquilizers to be able to run, like clearly he's not really gonna empathize, so to speak. And so his thing was, I think I remember hearing it several times, people like, are you hurt or are you injured? Right. And there's that critical difference of, to your point, of training through things and being hurt and keeping going and learning kind of what's what. And sometimes it can be a gray area, and sometimes you can push that envelope a little bit, and you kind of need to, but that's a tricky zone, I guess.
It is tricky. I mean, now other stuff is coming up for me as you're talking about this, because I'm remembering that in high school, I think it was when I was a junior in high school, I developed an injury. It's probably because I got these shoes that really didn't have any support whatsoever. And I don't know why I did. I think they probably because they were light. But I developed, what was it? It was something in my lower back or something, where my hamstring connects, maybe in the back. And I remember that it was approaching, I think it was after the county championships, approaching like the state qualifying meet or something like that. And I was really in pain. Like, I knew it wasn't good. I knew at practice it wasn't good. And I think I was kind of hiding it from my coach. So he didn't even really quite realize that I was so injured. But I couldn't let go of the race that I had my heart set on. So I ran. I mean, I could barely do the warm up for that race because I was in so much pain. I ran the race. I might even run a PR that race, as nutso as that is, right? And then literally afterwards, I could not walk. Like, I finished the race and I could not walk. And of course I couldn't compete in the state meet the week later, or 2 weeks later, or whatever it was, because then I was on crutches, actually, because I had really hurt myself. But so I'm definitely not advocating that level. But at the same time, sometimes, I mean, I think you have to be honest with yourself, like, to know what's at stake here, to know this race is really important to me. I'm probably hurting myself by doing this, but maybe it's that important to you that it's worth it or something. I'm not going to judge somebody, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not necessarily what you want to be going for. Certainly with your training and your racing, it's not great to be going through a whole season or your whole life from here on.
How amazing the body is, and to see how some of that plays out. So you're typically in that kind of 15 mile to like 50K range or whatever, where things kind of break down. You get a little bit of beat up, but and you may have experience going longer too, but it just becomes that much more dramatic, where in that, typically, I don't know, maybe you'll get a lull around like a 50K, and then it'll hit you again around 60 or 75 miles or whatever, where things are really not okay and really broken. You're like, I'm done. Like, there's no coming back. And all the years of just directing events and putting on 100-milers and running a couple, it's a wild thing to see what the body's really capable of. Like, literally, you are broken in that moment, but if you can kind of just hang in there, you bounce back. And that's kind of such a beautiful thing, I think, about our sport as well, is when you find that kind of mental, emotional, physical transcendence zone where it becomes very clear, and just amazing how capable the body is, I guess, in adapting like that.
Oh, definitely. That's one of the things I think that attracted me to the longer races for a while, because I certainly had an experience. There was this race I did a couple of years in a row. It's like 36 miles. It's called Musalamu in Vermont. And I remember very distinctly that there were just these huge swings, like I was done. And then I had a little bit of ginger ale, and 5 miles later, I felt fine, So that's interesting. And it's philosophically, it's an interesting, existentially, it's an interesting experience to go through, where you can think that you're completely done and you just make yourself keep going, and you actually can feel amazing a little bit later on. But I will say, I mean, I have mixed feelings about the really long distances. I know they've become super popular. That's what everyone is into these days, or a lot of people are into. That seems to be like the people who are really well known in the sport. It's like, how many miles can you run before? I mean, literally, it's like, who's finding out the limits of human endurance? And of course, that's cool. But what I really like, as I may have already kind of implied about these shorter races, is that you can really push yourself and certainly feel what you're doing, especially when you get into the technical racing. And then the next day, you can also not be able to walk because you push so hard. You know. But somehow it's different from that other thing that you're talking about, which I experienced. The last time I experienced it was when I did the Tussey Mountain back in 2019, when it's like you're broken. You actually think to yourself, I'm maybe breaking my body. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that. It wasn't really something I'm into anymore. I think for a while I was more curious about it, and I thought it was interesting to explore. And this one I was like, this isn't necessarily what I want to be doing, because I would like to still be doing this sport in 10 years and 20 years. And I don't want to hurt myself. And in that case, I don't know. I think this very unsurprisingly, this was maybe 39 miles into the 50 miler, which I did not properly train for. I was just training for the trail racing up to 25K. So it's like big surprise that your body's going to fall apart at 40 miles. And then the last mile, I was able to suddenly crank out a 7-minute mile or something. So that's pretty good. But yeah, it's a different kind of caliber of what you're doing to yourself. And I don't know, I'm going to be curious to see what happens with people who do those long races again and again, like how their bodies hold up. And
I think when I first got into the trail ultra scene, my first race out of college. So in college, I preferred cross country. I was a steeplechaser as well. I didn't really go long. I got out of college to ever having raced a 10K. And then my first race out of college was the Massanutten 100, which I didn't finish. I dropped at 82 after I think I took my first 5K out in under like 17 minutes or something like that. And so it felt comfortable. But to your point, you get up and you see these changes, and then you don't have the experience to know how you can hang in there and how you can come out the other side or whatever. But like jumping into the sport then when it was still relatively young, like maybe that was like the second generation or whatever, I think that was still a bit more of an unknown. It was, how much can these elite individuals be stacking these and going back to back? And you had individuals that had amazing longevity in the sport, and Trazen, and individuals which could keep going. But then but there were other individuals that were pushing these really fast times. And I think the thought was, unlike marathons. So from my vantage point, I think for people marathoning, you've got like 2 or 3 like top end marathons like in you, where you fully deplete it. And then I think it really starts kind of taking pieces or bites out of you. And the thought was with hundreds, because it's, or whatever, that longer stuff, because it's a little bit lower effort, could you keep going? And so I think we were looking at that a bit. You had like the Jureks of the world that would get 7 or 8 times Western States, but then there were other people that were just completely frying or cooking their systems, and they were around for like a year or two, or they were like the Anton Krapichnas of the world that, were completely broken within like a few years or whatever. And that
makes sense to me that people would all be different, I mean, for myself, I think the longer distance stuff has lost some of its appeal, because the way that I feel about it essentially is that when you're doing these really technical races with the elevation, like, 12, 16 miles tends to be, that's like enough to get a really good workout. If you're running a 25K with 4,000 feet of elevation gain really hard, like you're going to be toast at the end, or you should be,
If you're working the way that you're working, I mean, you're out
Right.
there. Yeah.
Right. So you shouldn't really you should really need to run another 30 miles or something in order to feel like, oh man, I really did it today. On the other hand, I do like trying new and different things, and I don't really like just doing the same races over and over again and stuff like that. So part of the reason I tried the Tussey mountain back is that I thought, oh, it'll be interesting to see how this goes now that I've trained for the technical races a lot more seriously, to see if kind of the endurance and the strength that I built would in any meaningful way translate over into a longer distance. I mean, that's a very hilly race, so I think it kind of did. But I'm not sure in terms of, what's going to be interesting to explore. Yeah. Like I kind of think, I want to try a 100-miler, but I'm not thinking, oh, and I want to just like keep doing that, all the time. Because I also think it's fun to go fast. And I guess, there are people who do those races quite fast, but it's still not as fast as you'd be going if you were you were running a short distance.
So a couple questions in here. One from Kaylin Hopkins says, do you cross train to supplement your running? And I'll just go through them here, and then we'll get back to them. All right. So do you cross train to supplement your running? And have you ever been coached? And then also, do you recommend a strategy other than getting on the technical trails for someone who wants to improve on the downhills? And then I'll move into the next one in a second.
Sure. Okay. So cross training, I used to be great about cross training before the pandemic. I think I was great about cross training. So I would bike commute to school and to work. So I was probably biking like 20 miles a week or something. And I was also a big fan of lifting. So I do like upper body and core strength, I think pretty seriously, a couple times a week. That has all changed since the pandemic started. So I'm still trying to keep up with the core training and upper body strength at home. I honestly don't know how big of a factor that's been in my success the last couple of years, but it just seems like a good idea to be overall fit. And certainly the core, I think, is really important with the technical racing. So I've tried to do that at home to the best of my ability. Otherwise, though, I don't cross train. At least I haven't been as much. I mean, it's winter now, and they just opened the skating loop at Lake Morey. So Nordic skating is something that I've tried to do when the conditions are right. I wasn't able to do it living in PA, but I did that on Monday. So I went out for a few hours, and that was like the best thing in a while because it was something different and slightly different muscle groups, and you can go fast and glide along. It felt amazing. So I try to cross train and still do that. I definitely recommend it. I definitely recommend it for the strength and training and for the variety too. What was the second part of her question?
And then do you recommend a strategy for someone who wants to improve on the downhills?
Yeah. So I haven't had so I had a coach in high school, and then I had a coach for one season in college, which was the one season I competed. And that's the last time I had a coach. That was quite a long time ago. So in general, I'm self-coached. I still think I apply the principles I learned from my high school coach, actually, or I try to. But that was like high school track. So it's a little different. I thought about maybe trying to get some coaching help, but I'm not sure. And then about the downhills, that's a great question. I don't think I have a specific idea other than keep working on it. I am not sure how I got so fast in the downhills. I think that's like really my best skill in the trail running. I think it helps that I have these like thick ankles. So if the times that I do slip a little bit, it doesn't hurt too bad, or most of the time it doesn't. I shouldn't say that, because one time, this is the injury I'm talking about from like May of 2019, where I really, really hurt my ankle and then had to continue to race on it for a couple months. I think the more you do it, like you just learn to be more agile, or you should. I can't say if it'll work for everybody, but I know for me, it's almost like learning how to dance or something like that. And it's one of the things I love about this kind of running, actually, is that it's so interesting and it's like so difficult. And it's also thrilling. I mean, there's nothing I could think about trail running, any singular thing, that's as thrilling for me as like crushing it on a rocky, steep downhill. It's just like, I want to say it's terrifying, but you also can't really let yourself feel the terror. It's just kind of exhilarating. And
that's a big thing, right? The mentality to be able to let go, especially the courses with the technicality that you're doing. When I'm just thinking of, again, I'm reflecting back on a course, for instance, like Frozen Snot, on the, you get up that first boulder field and you drop down over some technical stretches, climb again. And again, because I knew nothing about the course, that next descent, after you make that right turn at the top of the hill or whatever, where it's not a technical one and it's not that steep, but it's absolutely just one of I think the most beautiful downhills that I have ever run on a course, where it's just flowing for like the next mile or whatever. And it's just complete bliss through that kind of open forest and being able to hammer. And you're speaking to more the technical downhills, that I think that speaks to your coordination, your skill, your strength, but also another complete immersion moment with trail running, where you have to be totally tuned in, let go, choosing your lines, and then like mentally, you could kind of lose your teeth on any kind of toe trip or whatever, or like a course like Escarpment, I kind of told myself I wouldn't go back to, even it was such a beautiful course. But on those, you kind of have to throw yourself into these like blind, like cliff or like rock jumps where you can't even see your footing coming down. And it's just like this blind leap of faith or whatever, where you have to just be able to let go.
It's so funny that you say that, because I was really hoping to do that race last year and then they didn't have it. And the reason I hadn't signed up for it, I think a couple of years beforehand, was that it's one of those races where they say things that are intended to scare you, but they're just over the border of like me making the decision about whether or not I'm going to do it. So it's like, you might literally run off of a cliff. And I'm like, okay, I'm good on the technicals, but
but that's legit, right? I mean, you get to these on that course, and I think it one, unfortunately, I can't remember whether it was during the race or just on the course, where it actually happened in one of the early years, where I think it was during the race, where somebody had to be airlifted off because you literally can run right off of this cliff.
Right. I mean, as long as it's like, it's funny because now you make it sound like there's 10 times during the race where maybe you're going to run off the cliff and you're not sure.
No, there's only the one prime one right before the finish, where if you don't make that fairly hard right turn, you're running off a cliff. But most of the race is just this technical, flowy, jumping off rocks.
I can't wait to do that race, honestly. But yeah, I loved what you're saying about the immersion. I mean, this is what I think is so great about the trail running, because this came up earlier in response to something else you said, but I think I lost the strand. I mean, I think for me, part of what happened with my running, certainly growing up on Long Island, and then, God, the summer that I was training for college was like brutal, because the coach had us doing, 8 miles a day or something. But it was so hard for me to find a place to do a pleasant 8 miles every day. I'm just running in the suburbs. And it was just mentally, it took a lot out of me. And I think just in general, I was very, I'm kind of a perfectionist. Maybe you can't say I'm kind of a perfectionist. You're either one or not. I'm a perfectionist. And I was so obsessed with the numbers. So, I mean, and this was like before GPS watches, but I remember I was so obsessive about it. And this is how it related to what you said earlier, because I wouldn't really let myself rest. So even if the coach was like, okay, do an easy 3 miles, I'm like checking my watch, like I know that was about a mile. Oh, was it 7:10? Or, oh God, yesterday it was 7:15. Today it's 7:20. I'd get obsessive about this stuff. And I think it just wasn't a very sustainable way to be approaching a sport that you're trying to do seriously for a long time. And something that I think is great about trail running is that you just can't really obsess over that stuff. It doesn't make any sense to think I'm going to have to be hitting a certain time mark for every mile, because every mile is totally different. Yep. And you just have to let go, and you have to trust your body. I mean, that's the other thing. It's not really about the numbers. It's like, am I exerting myself? Am I doing the best that I can in every moment? Am I running up the hill as best I can, running down the hill as best I can? And you have to also really stay focused and pay attention. Like, you really have to look at what you're doing. And that, I think, is just such a blessing, because, I mean, not to get into a big cultural, social critique or something, but so much distraction in our lives. But I also think with regular running, like, not to knock road running, but certainly my experience of it, it's pleasant in some ways to zone out and just be like, la la, whatever. But I know that for me, I'm much more drawn to checking my watch and worrying about the time. And with trail running, that just doesn't, that doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, you have to notice. And also, it's really kind of fun that you might think you're stepping on a rock that's going to be a good one, and it might really not be a good one. So you have to adjust in the moment a lot. You have to make lots of split-second decisions and really stay on your toes. And if you don't, it'll be even more interesting. So,
well, there's, for a time, I think probably 5 years or so, I lived in Central Oregon, kind of along the Cascade Mountains, and as you just said, you don't know where, in terms of the rock that you're going to step on. I just got this visual. I think one of my most favorite things in the world is kind of scree surfing. So you get up in these like alpine zones where it's just these big scree fields. And when you get in some pretty steep ones, to just run down those scree fields is one of the more like amazing fields, where it's literally this whole mountain is of rocks is like shifting underneath of you, and you're literally just having to kind of be in the flow and move. And obviously you got to be careful that there's nobody down below you, and there's been a couple tricky spots like that, but to have the earth and the rocks and move underneath you and just to be in that moment, just amazing. There's another question in here from Jenny Goranson. Not sure if, sorry. What are your thoughts about the barefoot running, born to run philosophy of running shoes being problematic?
I can't imagine really running barefoot on a lot of the kinds of courses I'm doing. I mean, there are some people who do them in these really simple shoes, because there are oftentimes, like in these Central PA races, there are Mennonites who do the races, and they do really well. And I think there's some race where I saw a race photo that had a person in these little sandals. But in general, because of the rocks, seems like a bad idea. More broadly than that, well, it's funny. I was going to say something about how much I love the shoes that I use, but in truth, the shoes that I really love are the Salomon Speed Cross Pros, and they stopped making them. So I was going to have a shoe to show you that's like hilariously full of holes, and so it's so beyond done. But it's my last. It's like my last pair of the Speed Cross Pro. I had bought 4 pair in different colors when they were on sale, like 3-4 years ago, and it's like so sad that I even wear these shoes at all. But they're just the best for me. They're the best shoe. So I have to figure out what to do now. But in any case, I do still generally like Salomon's, and they make some great trail shoes. So I think the shoes help you if you have the right shoes, in terms of the traction and stuff. So I wouldn't really want to be running barefoot on a lot of these courses. In terms of road running and stuff, I don't know. It seems like a lot of impact directly on your feet. Maybe if I was a person who had foot issues or something like that, I might be more drawn to trying the barefoot running, but I just haven't really had a reason to, because I feel like the Speed Cross Pro, for example, it's kind of silly, but I did a couple of half marathons on the road in the Salomon Speed Cross Pro, and I ran great. It's a trail shoe, but it's light, and it worked for me. So I'm not sitting around with a wish to find out what's going to happen if I take the shoes out of the equation.
I'll have to look back at that shoe. I mean, I've been around shoes now with having multiple stores for like 20 years. I wasn't familiar with the Pro version. I mean, all I know that I really dislike the Speed Cross. Just feels like kind of a brick in my foot. So to hear you say it felt kind of light or soft, you'll have to show me that holy shoe like at some point. I'll have to look back and see just how different the Pro version was. I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, for sure. So it's way lighter, and basically the bottom, it still has traction, but it's much flatter in general. And it's also smoother on the top. So I think the thing with Salomon, this is what I figured out, is that Pro just means that like the top is smooth. So it doesn't have those things like the Speed Cross has that little jagged thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that. It's just like part of the design that's drawn on, but it's not actually popping out. But it's a lot lighter. I know now I tried this regular Speed Cross and I was like, absolutely not. It feels like a brick. But now that you mention that, the first time I did the Vermont 50, so this is me going from like the first time for the 50K where I wore road shoes. And I was like, all right, I'm going to train for the 50 miler. So I better get some trail shoes, and I better get this is hilarious. I better get a hydration pack. So I go to EMS and I get these shoes that they must have been like adventuring shoes. They're like the heaviest shoe that Salomon sells. They're maybe like the XA Comp or the XA Pro or something.
Yeah.
I guess they might be trail running shoes, but they're so heavy. And I just had no comprehension that those are on the heavier end. I was like, I guess this is what trail running shoes are. So I trained for and ran a 50-mile race in those shoes. And I think I had gotten like 100-liter Camelback that this guy at the store sold me. And I think I wore it for maybe 3 training runs. And I was like, okay, I can't do it because it was bouncing. It was way too big. So yeah, these things make a big difference. Like find a shoe that is enough support, but is light, because it's going to most likely help you. The really thick shoes, I don't think that helped my time that year, nor did the pneumonia, but anyway. So,
all right, let's go into some of the events that you've done. Cause again, you've done a lot of beautiful events. You mentioned one of the Green Furnace one. That's one of
Greenwood
your.
Furnace. That's actually my favorite Pennsylvania trail race, I think, or at least one of my top favorites. That one's really cool.
I don't think that one as much as my radar. Where's that one, and what's that course all about?
Okay, so that one's in May normally. It's a very like early season kind of race, and Greenwood Furnace State Park. I think I'm terrible with geography, but it's only maybe 20 minutes. No, okay, 25 minutes from State College, so quite close in that area. And it's a pretty rocky race. So it has a couple of really good climbs. I'm not good at describing races. I should have told you this before the interview, but it has some good rocks. I think that maybe the second climb is like 1,500 feet or something. But it's basically, it kind of intersects with these Rothrock roads. So I also didn't train at all on the Rothrock roads before the Tussey Mountain back. And then after I ran it, heading into the pandemic, I was thinking I was going to do it again. So I spent the winter and the spring and the summer training on those roads. And I was delighted to discover that the roads really overlap with all these trails. So it's like, oh, this is whatever, I forget the name of the trail now. But it intersects with the trails that go through the Greenwood Furnace course. So it like goes down into Alan Seeger State Park and then up again. I don't know if you know Alan Seeger State Park.
I don't know that one. Yeah, I'm changing my head. It sounds good, but no, I don't.
Yeah, so State College people will know, I think. Yep. And Rothrock, of course, people love Rothrock. Yeah, so that's a cool race that I really highly recommend. And I guess there's a furnace. That's why they call it Greenwood Furnace. So they have this really cool logo with a picture of the furnace. There's some interesting history there.
Actually, I think I did. All right. So I'm starting to learn a lot more of these as I'm doing the weekly rundowns and events results or whatever. Greenwood. I wonder if event registration opened or something like that. Now I'm getting the visual of the logo now that you mentioning it and plugging it and making some sort of comment regarding the furnace or something. Okay.
Well, you must be talking about a lot of different races. So.
Oh yeah.
In your show. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The fun thing about that one is that that's one of the very few races that I've actually done like more than once. And I think I did it actually 3 times. So the first time I did it, it was towards the end of one of my first years of graduate school. And I was just a mess. It was like the end of a very long semester, a very long year as a parent in grad school. And I think I had barely slept for a couple of weeks before the race. And then it was like raining and rocky. And I just thought, what is this? Like, what is this? And then the next year, I think I had trained more and I was better rested in general, but I still wasn't training really for that kind of terrain. So I beat my time by like 10 minutes compared to the year before. And that felt pretty amazing. I still didn't win that year, but I was like a lot closer, I think, to starting to, realize my potential with it. And then for the next year, I really had trained. I think I'd even gone out there, to train on the course. And then I beat my time again by 10 minutes, as far as I remember. And that was pretty cool to like actually see the improvement. Because with a lot of the other races, it's like, oh, I did a bunch of races in 2019, but most of them I'd never done before. So I can't compare to how I would have done, the year before.
And how about making the comparison Vermont to PA? Which is the better trail state?
Right. You had mentioned that you're gonna. Well, the thing is, I have such love for Vermont in my heart that I can't not vote. I can't not vote for Vermont because of how much I love Vermont. However, and I should also say, caveat is that all the years I lived in Vermont, there are a lot of trails I didn't check out. So now that I've been spending some time here again, it's really kind of sad, but I'm finally running on the AT, which goes directly through the town that I lived in for years, and I never ran on the AT. Actually, I ran on the AT a single time with a friend who took me out there. I literally lived on the street that it is on, like where I still didn't run on it. I finally.
Was that by intention, or you just like never got to it? Or you're like, everybody does the AT. I'm not going to go do the AT.
I think it just seemed like this other thing that you required a different kind of person that I wasn't, or something. It's like I don't have the right shoes. I'm going to get lost. I don't know.
Now that we dig into that in terms of you and your perception and how you've developed and feeling comfortable in your own skin, you're like not that kind of person, but here you are now and where you've arrived.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting. Yeah.
Were you wearing flannel at that time too, when you weren't?
No, not at all. No, this is just the last few years, and now it's become like an essential part of my being. So,
And you probably weren't into wearing truckers then either, trucker hats.
That's a really good question. Actually, I was.
Nice. There's an evolution here.
I wish I could share the pictures, because I have a picture of myself holding my son, who's 7 now, when he was like 2, and it was at this race in Maine. It used to be Pineland Farms, and now it's something different. But I was wearing it. That was the first race actually, where they gave us some free Solomon trucker hats, and I just fell in love and never went back. You know, we still have those, the ones that they gave us years ago.
And so speaking to all right, and that's another thing. I mean, it is as strong as you are and how much you're racing, you have a ton on your plate as well. I mean, you're a mom, you're pursuing not just one, but a dual PhD degree there. And you're juggling a decent amount.
Yeah, I am. I mean, I'm lucky. I feel really lucky that I am. I will say, I think part of the reason that it works is that I have a ton of support. So my spouse has always been really great. Like, it's not, well, I don't know what most people's situations are, but, you know, he's the first to want to be around at home, like with my son, if I need to go for a run, or, you know, when I always need to go for my run. Not like if I need to go for a run, but yeah, it's pretty much predictable. But he's also just great at helping me to accomplish all these things that I'm trying to do at the same time. The PhD, I'll say, the first couple of years were definitely very difficult in terms of just the energy. And I couldn't even think about doing a race until the year was over, basically. So like May or June, I made it through. Like, I made it. Maybe I can see if there's a race I can still sign up for. But once I got through the coursework portion of it, it became a lot easier, because it's a ton of work, but you can kind of make your own schedule. It depends. I mean, when you're teaching and stuff, then of course you have to be in the classroom teaching for a certain amount of time. But in terms of your research, I mean, I think it's a double-edged kind of thing, because on the one hand, it's amazing. You could go out for a run whenever you want. If the only thing you have to do that day in terms of your work is, let's say, write 5 pages of your dissertation, like you can do that at 8:00 a.m. You can do that at 8:00 p.m. Nobody's going to tell you what's right. On the other hand, it's not the kind of job that you ever leave behind. So it's pretty much the opposite of a 9 to 5 kind of thing. You know, you are always thinking about those 5 pages that you have to write, and the next 5 pages that you have to write, and the next article that you have to try to publish, or whatever it is. So yeah, I guess it takes a certain kind of person to figure out how to piece it all together, you know, and it takes a lot of support too.
And is your spouse a runner as well? Does he kind of get it?
So he grew up in Vermont, and he downhill skied in high school, and I think he played soccer too. Get this, so he did the Frozen Snot, he did the short course, and I think he came in 7th. I also came in 7th, the Frozen Snot last year, and he might have trained for that. But not that I remember. So he will he's a good athlete. He will jump into a race maybe once a year and do really well. And he definitely has some technical ability. Apparently they used to go out and train in the woods for ski training. So yeah, he's definitely not like a consistent, you know, daily runner, but he's athletic for sure.
So it's kind of in his soul, in his bones though, and he understands, he kind of feels it.
I think that must be true, because otherwise I don't see how a relationship would be working out in the way that it is. Yeah, I mean, certainly with the level of support that he gives me for when I'm trying to do, you know, I think you're onto something there.
And you have family up there as well, or is it just you and him and your son, or?
So you mean in Vermont?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, his mom is in Vermont. Actually, both of his parents and his stepmom are all in Vermont. So his family is all here. His sister is not around Vermont anymore. She lives out west now with her wife. Hi everyone, by the way, if you're all watching. But yeah, so he has family up here, and I lived here for a while, so it almost feels like family, because I just got to know a lot of people. Of course, now it's a pandemic; it's a pretty strange time. But I did all kinds of things too when I lived here. Like I did dog sitting, and I babysat lots of kids. So there are all these families I got to know really well. So it kind of feels like home in that way.
Is your family elsewhere? They're not in Vermont?
No, so I grew up on Long Island, and my parents still live on Long Island, and my sister lives in Manhattan. So I'm kind of like the one who moved away, you know.
Yeah.
But my mother's from Finland originally, and that's kind of what happened is that I did this summer program in Finland in high school, and I realized, oh, I think I'm kind of into the rural scene. I think I'm into trails. I think I can see in the very distant future that I'd be into
be my thing.
Running in the woods.
As
far-fetched of an idea as it was at that time.
So you're gonna have to head back to those roots, and I would imagine Finland would be some pretty amazing areas in Finland.
Yeah. I haven't been back in quite a long time, but we should definitely go.
And what do you got? So how much left is in your PhD, and what do you got coming up? At least for the spring semester here.
So we're basically counting down the months to me being done. So I have, I'm writing my dissertation. It's 4 chapters plus an intro and a conclusion, and I'm working on chapter 3. I have a draft of chapter 4, so it's not like I have to do the rest from here on, you know. But basically the plan is that I'll be done by May and then defend it in June and then graduate in August. So this is a 6-year program. So the fact that there's about 6 months left is pretty incredible. But I also started applying for jobs this year, which it's been a harder year than even the average year, which is hard. So I've discovered I'm a very sensitive person. I've discovered the cruelty of this process. It's like, you know, so I'm doing a PhD in philosophy and women's studies, and like philosophy is pretty difficult, and it's been a lot of years, and there's almost no promise of a job. It's not like, hey, congratulations, you finished your education, you know, here's a well-paying job. It's more like, yeah, you're gonna apply to a bunch of jobs. You're lucky if you get an interview. If you get an interview, pat on the back. Maybe next time around you'll get a second round interview, you know?
Right.
Whew. So
that's tough. You're pretty committed to that. I mean, you're pretty much committed to that academic track, right? I mean, with those two.
Yeah, that's not. I'm so glad you realized that. So many people are like, "Oh, what are you going to do with that?" It's like, "Well, what do you think? What do you think you're going to do with it?"
You've got about 2 options, maybe.
No, it's not one of those fields where, you know, you can go do different things with it. It's pretty much like you're going to be a philosopher. You're going to teach at a college, and you're going to write philosophy stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to go back on that plan now. So yeah, we're just gonna.
You're in. You're committed on that one.
Yeah, I'm in. Yeah.
All right, a couple more questions. So Emily Fiskin, for the 25K trails, 0 drop or not, and what kind of support for training versus races?
Great question. So I think the shoes that I love have 4 millimeter drop. I haven't really tried 0 drop. Are ultras 0 drop? Those are the ones that my spouse really loves. He's all into the ultras. I'm into the opposite. So I'm into the Solomon, which is like tight squeeze. Not a huge drop, but it's something. I mean, I think it's a personal question, like whatever works for you. What works for me tends to be the tighter shoes with a little bit of a drop. Lighter versus heavier. Right. So it's good to go lighter if you can, I think for racing. For sure. I tend to get a little bit spoiled or something, and then I want the light stuff for my training too, because it's like I like to go fast. But you have to make sure that there's enough support that you're not going to be, well, if you believe that this is important for your stability and everything, that you have enough support to do your training, to do the miles that you need to do. But I tend to go on the lighter side in general. Like, I got a pair of really light road running shoes that I race the mountain back in, and those are what I tend to use when I do any serious road running now, which is better than trail shoes. But the heaviest shoes I have are like the Gore-Tex Speedcross Pros for winter trail running, like on snow and ice. I don't even have micro spikes or anything like that. It's I'm just like so low tech, honestly. It's one of the things, it's just a place I still haven't gone. I mean, I got I was going to mention, I got my first GPS watch last March. So this is like a whole new world for me that I've been exploring.
Do you like that? Speaking to, I guess, I mean, that's kind of the other side of, seems like maybe, I don't know, the soul of it, so to speak, the soul of trail.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I like it. It's certainly given me something to do. I mean, I didn't know about Strava segments until last March. And so it's been great to have that as a way to still be sort of competitive in this time, since I haven't had a race since almost a year ago. But I think part of the reason I was able to be so successful the last racing season is that there's really this balance of intensity and seriousness with not worrying about what was my VO2 max. You know, did I get the segment crown when you're just supposed to be going out for a training run? So I'm hopeful for myself that I will be able to balance these two things in the future when I do get back to racing. But it might be that I have to give up the watch. I mean, I have to admit, there have been a couple of times. I also have the watch that you plug in to upload your results, and there are a couple of times that I didn't quite get the connection right, and so the watch just completely broke. I mean, there's one time that it was flat out broken. I don't know how I revived that thing, but it was just by some combination of buttons, magical, over 24 hours figuring it out. But it was this existential crisis where it's like, my watch is broke. How can will I run tomorrow without a watch? How can this be?
Right. It does change the wiring to a certain extent in your brain. And when it's there and you get used to it, and those feedback loops. And
another thing that's messed up is that my watch is not, it's a very simple one. It's like a Garmin Forerunner 235. And so it's not that smart actually. And so it'll constantly downgrade my VO2 max if I do a trail run. It's like you did a 9-minute mile and you were pushing that hard. Okay. We've got to set you. So, but then what's bad is that then I'm like, oh man, why did my VO2 max go down? And then that would encourage me to run on the road more. Cause then I get even if I do a slower run, not nearly as difficult, the VO2 max will be higher. So that's another one of those things. There's just not a great feedback loop to get into, but,
right. And Kylan Hopkins with another one. Do you have any desire to run in the Midwest or West Coast? If so, any race you're eyeing, and any bucket list race that has been on hold due to grad school?
Okay, cool. So actually my dream is to get a job out West. So that this is kind of how I'm hoping it's going to work out, is that I'll get an academic job out West so I can pursue my running out West, because I imagine that it's just kind of another set of challenges. And I've only been to Colorado, I think, once, and I don't even really have a comprehension of the kind of elevation they have out there. So yes, would love to run out West. I'm hoping to get out there. I don't have specific races in mind other than the Western States 100, but that's again one of those things where it's not as though I really want to start training for a 100-mile race. It's more like I think I train pretty hard and I train pretty smart and pretty well, and you can often do things with your body that you don't expect. Like the Tussey Mountain Back, I actually did really well in that race. So I would imagine that I'd just try to do the 100 without doing a ton of really long runs before that. But there's different ways to train too. So yeah, there haven't been races either. Well, actually, there were a bunch of races I was going to do last year. So my whole idea for last year for my racing season, it's not being on hold because of grad school, but it's more of the pandemic, is that I was thinking that I was going to do kind of just all the gnarly, longer PA trail races. I was going to do World's End and races like that, more the 50K, try 50K, 50 mile, a bit more, and just check it out and see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, back to the point about out West, I don't know though if they have the rocks and stuff. I mean, actually, my sister-in-law, I think, said to me at some point, you do so well on these trail races because the trails are really smooth and you're fast. And that's great, except that's way less interesting to me. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to figure out is how to approach going into this spring and this summer. I don't really feel comfortable yet jumping into races, but I'm trying to start figuring out what are some things I could do maybe on my own. There's this whole culture of FKTs, which I hardly know anything about, to be completely honest. And it'd be cool.
You'd be a perfect candidate, and because I'm announcing FKTs of the region every week as well. I kind of remember who's doing what and routes. And I was gonna say, I don't think I've seen you at all, especially having the GPS watch now. And seems like a good candidate to be pulling FKT routes anytime you wanted to go out.
It would be really cool if people had suggestions, if anyone had suggestions about what I should do, because it's mostly just a matter of lack of knowledge. That I don't know what are the things that are going to be interesting and challenging and meaningful. I have some ideas from hikes I did in college, like in New Hampshire, we hiked Moosalok. So is that a thing? I don't know how runnable that is.
Well, you should make it your thing, right? I mean, you've got enough experience and track record, and I think there's probably a lot of people that like you as an individual and look up to you as an athlete and know you pretty quick. And it seems like, well, I guess it's a constant evolution, but for sure, more knowing who you are as a runner and what you're really passionate about. I mean, you should just go. I mean, you're the trendsetter, right? You're the line setter. I mean, there are plenty of routes that I or anybody else could clue you into that have pretty competitive backgrounds, and that element is fun. I mean, with the FKT boom this year, it's interesting how many people are setting it, and that's a beautiful part of it, where it doesn't matter. It could be your own backyard route, and you're still going out and hammering it. But it's also in terms of I think it's also looking at the routes that do have a competitive history. I imagine you get into that mindset as well because you're a competitive individual. But that's to say that I think you'd like that, but I think that you should just go out and whatever your favorite runs are, create a route out of it and do it. Emily, who asked the question earlier, just weighed in and said the Prezi Traverse. I mean, that's one of the ones that's not too far from you in Vermont now. It's one of those classic routes that has a good storied competitive history to it. And it's tough to some of the people that are setting these FKTs too. They're not, I was about to say, I don't know. I don't know if you could, not to say you shouldn't go out and do it, but in terms of nabbing the FKT title, I don't know if that's one that you could, I don't know if you're that fast, but then I qualified it with, I was like, well, some of the people that are hitting these, they're not necessarily the podium racers. They're these individuals that are just, I mean, they're just mountain people. They just love being out there and they love the trails, and it just comes together that day. But you're not going to see them at your local trail race or podium or whatever. It's it's not, I don't know, it's an interesting subculture.
Yeah, well, that is certainly something that sounds really interesting about it. I mean, I haven't been following it, but that's another one of the things I like about trail running. I mean, even just in terms of people that you get at the races, it's very different from a road half marathon or something. It's a very different kind of challenge and activity and bonding activity, actually. But yeah, I mean, I've been finding that out already a little bit with, Strava segments where you can set your own segment. So I've done that a little bit. It's well, everyone thought it was really great to set this 1/4 mile section as a segment to race on, but no one, or maybe a mile, right? But nobody did the 7-mile stretch from Ledyard Bridge up to the top of King Road in Etna, New Hampshire. So that's something I created, because I run that all the time. Yeah, I mean, I've started to do that a little bit, but I do finally have the GPS watch at least, and I have a hydration pack now too, which I got because I did this virtual 93K last May. It was this Roxylvania. I think it was supposed to be a pseudo replacement for World's End in case World's End didn't happen, kind of thing.
Okay.
So that was pretty cool, where they had it so you could do it either all in one, or in 2 segments, or in 3 segments. And I did it in 2, only with a couple days in between. But I needed a hydration pack for that. And
you had your 100-liter one there. I mean, that's still kind of.
I still do have that one, and I will use it for hikes. But it's pretty it's a pretty old school kind of kind of thing. So
all right, and then one more. Jenny also Goranson, who asked a question earlier, said Bond Cliffs area, New Hampshire, has great long runs with scrambling as well. So, and that's what I've really enjoyed about announcing these FKTs each week is a lot of these that are being posted. Like, for instance, you just mentioned your Strava segment, where maybe ultimately you'll just then post that as an FKT track. But these people are posting in some pretty beautiful areas. And so it's fun to just read about these. Like if you go to the fastest known times, you look up maybe one in the state of New Hampshire or Vermont or wherever that's kind of close to you. And usually people are choosing really pretty segments. So it's fun to hear about those too.
Yeah, I should definitely check it out. I mean, I do have to get better with my, well, I don't know exactly how I'll do this. So I'm just such a low tech person, and I am not the best at navigation. I've gotten a lot better, but I've had a few pretty sketchy experiences getting lost in the woods. One time last spring where I was very, very close to spending the whole night out in the woods, and I really wasn't prepared for that. I didn't have a flashlight, or I actually didn't even own a cell phone at that time.
Well done. That was last year. That was last year, you said?
This was last, God, it might have been last May.
All right. I know we got to wrap this up here, but wow. All right. So you hadn't had a cell phone up until then, or that was just a period where you didn't have one?
No, I mean, there was a short period of time years ago where I had a flip phone kind of thing, but then I had given that up, and I didn't have. So well done, except for the fact that in this particular situation, it was
you used one.
Oh yeah. I mean, I didn't have a flashlight. I didn't have water. It was a super rainy night. The way that my spouse likes to say it is, he's like, you would have been a different person after that night if you hadn't made it out. And it doesn't even make sense that I made it out of the woods, because it was if anyone from PA is watching this, it was Shingletown Gap where I ended up coming through, from State College area, coming through completely in the dark. I mean, it was so dark I didn't even recognize it as Shingletown Gap, and I was running on these really rocky thing, basically in the dark, to emerge into civilization, to save myself. But it's like the experiences like that. I think even approaching something like an FKT, I'm like, how am I going to know the trail? How am I going to know where to go? The watch is very simple. It's not telling me directions. I don't have an aptitude for maps at this point. It's probably something I need to develop. I also tend to run and train completely alone. So it's not like someone who's showing me, hey, this is the Prezi Traverse or whatever, maybe next time try to get the Crown or something, or the FKT. So that's kind of a further thing for me to figure out, is the navigational aspect of it. Probably the main reason that I haven't done more stuff like that, to be honest. Like in races, it's marked hopefully it's marked really well. So you pay attention to the flags and you're usually okay. Yeah.
All right. So we'll get to held on to you long enough here. Thanks to all the individuals that are out there still watching. And for those of you who dropped some questions into this line, I think probably one of the most pressing questions probably from, I would guess, the trail scene is really what it's like to be the daughter of a country music superstar. I mean, your dad probably is Dwight Yokum, and I just imagine that's got to create a really interesting experience.
How has this not come up yet? Like, I thought
I know I was going to lead in with it, and I thought maybe I just won't even. I'll just ignore it because it's kind of like a paparazzi question.
Well, I'm surprised we got to the trail running at all, because I thought we were going to mostly talk.
I know we could have gone on to that, but I figured it would help us probably me get to wrapping it up. But I don't know. I think it's got pretty wild.
I mean, it certainly has been a challenge all the years, because like traveling, being on the road for shows just doesn't really go well.
Late nights, roadies.
My God. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten, like, the late nights are easier on me than they used to be. I've gotten pretty used to that. But I'm just like running from the tour bus, down the road a lot of the time, coming back. The food isn't really great either. It's like road food.
Yeah. And I can understand why you haven't had a phone then. I mean, you kind of have to check out when you're around stardom, I guess, that much.
Enough, right? Just like stay over there. Sometimes it's just like, stay over there. Please give me a minute.
And then anything else that would be fun to toss out, or any other shout outs or things you were hoping we'd get into?
Boy, probably, but we've talked about a range of stuff. I was going to say earlier, like, I can't vote against Vermont if I have to choose in a vote situation, but Pennsylvania is also really, really rad for trail running, certainly with the technical kinds of courses. And there's a great scene there with lots of these shorter distances and the longer distances. So that's something I really didn't have in Vermont. Maybe it's changed now. I'm not sure. I'll have to find out some more. But both places are pretty awesome for the trail running. I think anyone who might be watching who is new to it, or who doesn't feel like they've really come anywhere close to mastering trail running yet, I just really encourage you to keep with it. And also, it's okay to do things kind of at your own pace, and to get adjusted to it in a way that's good for you. Like, for me, it's really taken years to come to a place where I feel like I'm really doing well at it. Like, I'm finding out what I can do. I'm starting to find out what I can do. But it definitely was not an automatic thing. And I think that's okay too. Like, I think it's okay that for years I would train loops on the 5K course and then go to the 50K races, because that felt good for me, and that was a way to begin to explore what the sport is. But certainly, also speaking to your point earlier, I do think as people who are invested in trail running as a sport, we need to work harder to open it up to more people, because it really is such a blessing. And it's so lucky to be able to go out in the mountains and have that time that you're in nature. But yeah, especially if you don't grow up with that, having access to that, and it's not part of the culture, that you're a part of. It's just such a foreign thing and doesn't necessarily seem like a fun thing. And I know I just growing up on Long Island, like, I think I was really scared of the woods for a long time. I probably shouldn't admit that, but it was just like this really foreign thing. And it took a really long time for that to change, a really long time. And that's okay. But I think also, as like, certainly you as a race director, not to put you on the spot, but maybe I'll get into race directing someday too. I would like that. it's great if we can find the ways to make it really accessible so that people can try it, and also so that not all of the races are so difficult where it's like, hey, you want to try trail racing? How about 3,000 feet? And it's like, no, that's probably not going to be fun for the first time, maybe for some people, but I think we should be thinking about how to open it up and make it more inclusive rather than the opposite, which is like a narrowing of the field. And like, it's great to feel the camaraderie with other people, but I think the danger is it becomes a closed community. And well,
maybe if there's anything that I can do afterward. I know one of, for instance, you just historically wearing and liking Salomon, one of their shifts in focus this past year was supposed to be doing more women's clinics and more, I think, community outreach. And as opposed to just sponsoring these high profile events and just athletes, it was, more opening up the sport to more, and particularly women or individuals of color. And so,
sure,
there's at some point, if you're interested in that, that angle, I'll connect you with some Salomon people, and maybe you could.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I would love that. I think it's so important, and it relates to my work in like my professional work too. So it's something I'm really passionate about. But yeah, I would love to do some of that work. So that'd be great if you could.
Cool.
Be up with some people. I should give shout outs to my family, all my family members who have helped me so much, and to my son. Oh, I promised my son, this is probably too late to do this. He was going to do a minifigure. He's a Lego master. So we're a Lego family, big time. So my son wanted to do some minifigure show offs, and he's not
he's a master engineer. Let's see some of that work.
Okay, so he's not here to show them, but I promised that I would show some of the minifigures. Yeah. So like, here's one of our cool. Oh.
Right on.
Right. We've got some slightly odd ones. I mean, used to be that you could design these at the Lego store where they'd have all these parts.
It's a little scary. Like you talk about, being scared of the trails coming from Long Island. Like, dude, she's like holding a sword and she's got like cat ears, and I don't even know what's going on there.
I know there's all kinds of stuff that I should be more scared of that just seems totally normal for me. This is kind of like a Kill Bill vibe, I think. But then, we have some other fun ones. These are not showing off his creations at all, but we have a bunch of fun minifigures. Banana. I'm really bad with how the camera mirrors in a certain way, or doesn't mirror, as it were. That's
like, come on, like, that's frightening. Come on, like, if you.
It has a heart. It has a little heart.
Yeah, because he just took it out of somebody's chest.
Possibly. Wait, did I show this one already? This lady?
No, you got, like, look at her eye. She's carrying like this club. What is she gonna do with that?
Yeah, well, I was always really into Halloween. It's one of those weird facts about me. So that's probably a reflection of that, or like an adult manifestation of that. But then I have this really cutie one that's like one of my sons. So this is the Milo minifigure.
I can clear where you're kind of like wearing matchy shirts right now.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Whenever he draws our family now, or draws me, it's always me in buffalo plaid. So it's like, I guess this is your kid starts drawing you in a certain way. You're like, that's a real thing now. That's how I really am, I guess. Right.
Well, good shout out. What's his name? Milo, right.
Yeah, he goes to a lot of races too. So he's had some fun like photos taken and put in the newspaper, stuff like that, at races. And he's also a great like crew member, so he'll try to give me water during a race, and they'll cheer me on and stuff like that. It's super sweet. It's super sweet when it can become a family endeavor, and everyone enjoy being out there, even if it's mainly about the Oreos at the aid station, which I don't take, but he's into them,
That is a good sense of enjoyment with trail running. It's just this, it's wired now.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm looking forward to seeing you at hopefully another event, if we don't lose you to some Western academic position here too soon. And maybe we can get up and share some miles in your neck of the woods here at some point. Hey, that would be cool. I'd love to do that. All right. Thanks so much for having me. It was really fun. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being on. All right. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.